The sound of metal scraping concrete at 6:30 in the morning shouldn't have been enough to destroy someone's life. But here we are. I was out front clearing the driveway after Denver's first big snowfall of the season when I heard my front door neighbor's window slam open. Looking up from my work, I saw Brenda Hutchinson leaning out, her face already twisted into that expression I'd come to know too well over the past year. She was the self-appointed president of our Meadowbrook Hills HOA, and she treated that volunteer position like she was running a small dictatorship. "Excuse me." Her voice cut through the quiet morning air like nails on a chalkboard. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" I glanced at my watch, then back up at her. 6:30. I have to be at work by 8, and the roads are a mess. Just trying to get out of my driveway, Brenda. The HOA bylaws clearly state that no loud activities are permitted before 7 a.m. on weekdays. She was practically shrieking now, and I noticed a few other neighbors' lights clicking on. Great! I leaned on my shovel, feeling the cold December air burning my lungs. "Brenda, I'm shoveling snow. It's not like I'm running a jackhammer out here." "Violation is a violation, Peter." "I'm calling the police." And she actually did it. She actually called 911 because I was shoveling my driveway. I went back to work, figuring the cops would show up, realize how ridiculous this was, and leave. What I didn't expect was for this whole situation to spiral into something that would expose years of Brenda's schemes and land her in actual legal trouble. The police cruiser pulled up about 15 minutes later. I'd finished most of the driveway by then and was working on the walkway to my front door. 2 officers stepped out, and I recognized Officer Martinez from the neighborhood watch meetings. His partner was a younger woman whose name tag read Thompson. "Morning, Peter," Martinez said, looking tired and not particularly thrilled to be here. "Got a noise complaint?" "Yeah, I figured that's why you're here." I gestured to my half-cleared driveway, just trying to get to work. Brenda came storming out of her house before Martinez could respond. She was wearing a pink bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, completely inappropriate for the snowy weather, but she seemed too furious to notice or care. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man has been making an absolute racket since 6 a.m. The HOA has very strict rules about noise, and he's been violating them constantly." Officer Thompson pulled out a notepad. "Madam, can you explain the nature of the disturbance?" He's been shoveling. "The scraping noise woke me up." Martinez looked from Brenda to me, then to my driveway. "So you called 911 because your neighbor was clearing snow from his driveway. It's before 7 a.m. That's a violation of our HOA covenant." "Madam, 911 is for emergencies only," Thompson said, her tone professional but with an edge to it. "This is not an emergency situation." "But the rules clearly state, HOA rules don't supersede city ordinances," Martinez cut in. "And misuse of emergency services is actually a ticketable offense." I watched Brenda's face go from red to white in about 2 seconds flat. "What? No, I'm reporting a legitimate violation." Thompson was already writing. "Madam, you called emergency services for a non-emergency situation. According to Denver Municipal Code, you can be cited for this. But he's the one breaking the rules." Brenda's voice had gone up an octave, and she was pointing at me like I'd committed murder. "Shoveling snow isn't illegal," Martinez said. "In fact, city code requires property owners to clear their sidewalks within 24 hours of snowfall. What time does your HOA say he can start?" 7 a.m. for loud activities." "And what does the city say?" Thompson asked. Brenda sputtered. "I don't know, but our HOA city ordinance allows necessary property maintenance starting at 6 a.m., Martinez said. "Your HOA can't make rules that contradict city law. Mr. Zhu here is well within his rights." I'll admit, I was enjoying this more than I probably should have. Brenda had made my life miserable since I moved into Meadowbrook Hills 18 months ago. She'd sent me violation notices for everything from my grass being a quarter-inch too long to my car being parked incorrectly in my own driveway, whatever that meant. Watching her face as Thompson handed her a citation was incredibly satisfying. This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I'm trying to maintain order in this community. You need to appear in court on the date listed, Thompson said, handing over the ticket. Have a good day, madam. As the officers returned to their cruiser, Martinez paused. Peter, you might want to check those HOA bylaws carefully. I've seen a lot of these associations, and sometimes they try to enforce rules that aren't actually legal. Just a thought. I thanked him, finished clearing my driveway, and headed inside to shower for work. But Martinez's words stuck with me all day. That evening, I dug out the massive binder of HOA documents I'd been given when I bought my house. I'd skimmed them before closing, but I'd never really studied them in detail. What I found was disturbing. The next morning, I took a personal day and drove to the Denver Public Library. I spent hours comparing our HOA's bylaws with Colorado state law and Denver city ordinances. By lunchtime, I had a list of 14 separate violations where our HOA was attempting to enforce rules that directly contradicted actual law. The grass height restriction they'd cited me for contradicted city code that allowed grass up to 8 inches. The parking restriction, completely made up. The ban on certain types of plants in front yards violated state law protecting native species. The list went on, but that wasn't the most interesting thing I found. Digging through the HOA's financial disclosures, which by law had to be available to homeowners, I noticed some weird patterns. Large payments to something called BH Management Services for community maintenance. The thing was, I'd never seen any community maintenance beyond the basic landscaping of the common areas at the neighborhood entrance. I took photos of everything and decided to do more digging. My neighbor 2 doors down, Frank Morrison, had lived in Meadowbrook Hills since the development was built 15 years ago. I found him in his garage that evening, tinkering with an old motorcycle. Hey Frank, got a minute? He looked up, wiping grease from his hands. Sure, Peter. What's up? How long has Brenda been HOA president? Frank's expression darkened. About 3 years now. Why? Just curious. Things seem pretty tightly run around here. That's one way to put it. He set down his tools. Look, I don't like to gossip, but Brenda's made this neighborhood a lot less friendly than it used to be. Before she took over, the HOA was pretty relaxed. Now it's violation notices every other week and new rules that seem designed just to annoy people. Have you ever looked at the financial statements? Frank shook his head. Can't say I have. That stuff's boring as hell. What if I told you I found some irregularities? He studied my face. I'd say I'm not surprised. What kind of irregularities? I showed him the photos on my phone, pointing out the payments to BH Management Services. $30,000 over the past 2 years to this company. What have they done? Frank's eyes widened. $30,000. Our HOA fees are only $100 a month per house. That's not a huge budget. What else is the money supposed to go to? According to the bylaws, maintaining common areas, insurance, legal fees if necessary, and a reserve fund. But look at this. I scrolled to another document. The reserve fund hasn't grown in 3 years. It's actually decreased. That doesn't make sense. We've got, 80 houses in this development. That's $8,000 a month coming in, almost $100,000 a year. Where's it all going? That was exactly what I wanted to know. Over the next week, I became obsessed with figuring out what was going on. I filed a formal request with the HOA for detailed financial records, which they were legally required to provide within 10 business days. I also started talking to other neighbors, carefully feeling out their opinions on Brenda and the HOA. What I discovered was a neighborhood divided. About half the residents, mostly older homeowners who'd been there a while, were fed up with Brenda's increasingly aggressive enforcement of petty rules. The other half, newer residents mostly, seemed either indifferent or actually supportive of her strict approach. Then I talked to Margaret Chen, who lived on the next street over. "Oh, I have stories about Brenda," she said when I asked. "We were standing in her driveway while her kids played in the yard. Did you know she tried to fine me $500 because my son drew on the driveway with chalk?" "You're kidding." "Wish I was. She said it violated the community aesthetic standards. I told her to pound sand and the fine mysteriously disappeared, but not before she sent 3 nasty letters." "Did you ever fight back?" Margaret sighed. "I thought about it, but honestly, I work full-time. I've got 3 kids and my husband travels for work. I don't have the energy to go to war with the HOA. It's easier just to fly under the radar." That seemed to be the common attitude. Brenda had essentially won through attrition, wearing people down until they were too tired to fight back. But she'd picked the wrong target with me. I worked as a project manager for a tech company, which meant I was very good at organizing information, following paper trails, and being persistent. The HOA's response to my records request came on day 9. It was a letter from Brenda, typed on official HOA letterhead, informing me that the detailed financial records I'd requested would require a processing fee of $250. I immediately looked up Colorado HOA law. Processing fees were allowed, but they had to be reasonable and related to actual costs. For electronic records, which is what I'd requested, there was no way scanning and emailing documents could cost $250. I wrote back, citing the specific statute, and demanded the records within 3 days or I'd file a complaint with the Colorado Division of Real Estate, which oversees HOAs in the state. 2 days later, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should see this." Inside was a zip file containing what looked like years of financial records for Meadowbrook Hills HOA. But these weren't the sanitized summaries that had been posted on the community website. These were detailed ledgers, bank statements, and invoices. And they showed exactly where the money was going. BH Management Services wasn't a real company. The business address listed was a UPS store mailbox in Aurora. The payments were being made by check, and when I looked at the images of the canceled checks, I could just make out the endorsement stamps on the back. They'd been deposited into an account belonging to Brenda Hutchinson. She'd been embezzling HOA funds for at least 3 years. I stared at my computer screen, my heart pounding. This wasn't just petty HOA tyranny anymore. This was actual fraud, probably felony level given the amounts involved. I needed to be smart about this. I couldn't just go to Brenda and confront her. I needed to document everything and go through proper channels. I spent the rest of that evening making backup copies of all the files and organizing them into a clear timeline of payments and dates. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one who specialized in HOA disputes. Her name was Patricia Morris, and she had good reviews online. "Mr. Zhu, what you're describing is quite serious," she said after I'd laid out everything I'd found. "You're essentially alleging embezzlement and fraud." "I know. That's why I wanted to talk to a lawyer before doing anything else." "Smart move. Do you know who sent you these files?" "No idea. The email address was just a string of random letters and numbers at a Gmail account." Probably someone else in the HOA who knew what was going on but didn't want to be identified. Here's what I recommend. File a complaint with the Colorado Division of Real Estate immediately. They have an HOA enforcement division that investigates this kind of thing. Also, given the amounts involved, you should report this to the Denver Police Department's Fraud Division. Will they actually do anything with this level of documentation? Absolutely. This is cut and dried. She created a fake company and paid HOA money into her personal account. That's textbook embezzlement. Patricia helped me file the complaint with the state that afternoon. We included all the financial records, my analysis of the fake company, and a detailed timeline. Then we went to the police station, where I spent 2 hours giving a statement to a detective named Sarah Kowalski. "This is good work," Detective Kowalski said, flipping through the printed documents I'd brought. "Most people wouldn't have caught this or known how to document it properly. What made you start digging?" I told her about the snow shoveling incident and the ticket Brenda had received. Kowalski actually laughed. "So she calls the cops on you for shoveling snow, gets cited herself, and in revenge, you discover she's been stealing from the HOA for years." It wasn't revenge exactly. I was just curious about the HOA rules and it spiraled from there. "Well, whatever the motivation, you've handed us a solid case. I'll need to get a warrant for her bank records to confirm the deposits, but based on what you've shown me, I think we've got probable cause. This might take a few weeks to put together properly." Weeks. She's going to notice the state investigation soon, won't she? Probably. But here's the thing about embezzlers. They usually think they're too smart to get caught. She might just try to brazen it out. Detective Kowalski was right. 3 days after I filed the state complaint, I got a hand-delivered letter from Brenda. It was a cease and desist, claiming I was harassing her and spreading false information about the HOA's finances. It threatened legal action if I didn't stop immediately. I forwarded it to Patricia, who actually seemed pleased. "This is perfect," she said. "She's trying to intimidate you into backing off, which shows consciousness of guilt. Save everything she sends you." The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. These were supposed to happen monthly, though Brenda had a habit of canceling them if she didn't feel like dealing with homeowner questions. I hadn't been to one yet, but I marked this date on my calendar. I wanted to see how she'd handle the heat. The meeting was held in the community room of a church just outside our neighborhood. When I arrived at 7 p.m., there were maybe 20 people there, which Frank had told me was higher than usual attendance. Word was getting around that something was happening. Brenda sat at a folding table at the front of the room, looking composed but tense. She had papers spread out in front of her and a laptop open. 2 other board members sat with her, Tom Hendricks, the treasurer, and Linda Wu, the secretary. Both looked uncomfortable. "Let's begin," Brenda said, banging a gavel like she was running an actual courtroom. "First item on the agenda is approving last month's minutes." "Point of order," I said, standing up. Brenda's eyes locked onto me and I could see the fury there. "Mr. Zhu, you need to wait to be recognized." "Actually, according to Robert's Rules of Order, which your own bylaws say govern these meetings, any homeowner can raise a point of order at any time." Several people turned to look at me with interest. Brenda's face was turning red. "Fine. What's your point of order?" "I'd like to add an item to the agenda. Discussion of HOA finances and the payments to BH Management Services." The room went dead silent. Tom, the treasurer, looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Linda was staring at her laptop screen like it held the secrets of the universe. "That's not how this works," Brenda said. "Agenda items must be submitted in writing at least 48 hours before the meeting. Actually, that's not in your bylaws anywhere, I checked. Well, it's an informal rule. Then we can informally add it to the agenda, I said. Unless you have a reason you don't want to discuss it. Frank stood up. I'd like to hear about it too. Peter mentioned something about $30,000 to a management company I've never heard of. Other people started murmuring. Margaret Chen raised her hand. I want to know where our money is going to. Brenda was losing control of the room and she knew it. This is highly irregular. Tom, as treasurer, can you address these concerns? Tom looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. I can provide a summary of our expenditures. BH Management Services has provided various maintenance and administrative services over the past 3 years. What services specifically? I asked. I'd have to check my records. You're the treasurer at a treasurer meeting and you don't know what $30,000 was spent on. I have summaries, not detailed invoices. Why not? Tom opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at Brenda. That look told me everything I needed to know. He was either in on it or had been kept in the dark deliberately. This is absurd, Brenda said. I don't have to justify every expense to someone who's been in this community for barely a year and has already racked up multiple violations. Violations for having grass a quarter inch too long and shoveling snow at a legal hour, I shot back. And actually, yes, you do have to justify expenses. Colorado law requires HOA boards to maintain detailed financial records and make them available to homeowners. I requested those records 2 weeks ago, and you were informed of the processing fee, which was illegal and designed to prevent me from seeing what you've been doing. How dare you imply? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. BH Management Services doesn't exist. It's a shell company. The money paid to it was deposited into your personal bank account. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Some people pulled out their phones, probably to Google the company name. Brenda stood up so fast her chair fell over backward. That's slander. I'll sue you for every penny you have. It's only slander if it's false, I said calmly. And I've already filed a complaint with the Colorado Division of Real Estate and a police report for fraud. So please sue me. I'd love to go through discovery. Brenda grabbed her laptop and papers and stormed out of the room. Linda and Tom sat frozen at the table, looking shell-shocked. The meeting devolved into chaos, with everyone demanding answers and talking over each other. Frank managed to restore some order. Okay, look, clearly we've got a serious problem here. I move that we suspend all HOA expenditures until this gets sorted out and that we hire an independent auditor to review the books. Margaret seconded it, and the vote was unanimous among everyone present except Tom and Linda, who abstained. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. The state investigation confirmed what I'd found and referred the matter to the district attorney's office. The independent auditor we hired found even more irregularities, including fake invoices for legal services and insurance that had never actually been rendered. The total amount Brenda had stolen came to just over $63,000 over a 3.5-year period. Detective Kowalski called me on a Thursday morning. We're executing a warrant for Brenda Hutchinson's arrest today. Thought you'd want to know. Seriously. Seriously. The DA thinks this is a slam dunk case. We've got the fake company, the bank records showing deposits, and the auditor's report. She's being charged with theft, embezzlement, and forgery. I watched from my window that afternoon as 2 police cars pulled up to Brenda's house. She came out in handcuffs, still in her business casual clothes, looking smaller somehow than she had at the HOA meeting. Her husband followed, talking frantically on his phone, probably calling a lawyer. Several neighbors came out to watch. I saw Margaret recording on her phone. Frank gave me a thumbs up from his driveway. It should have felt like a bigger victory, but mostly I just felt tired. The case moved through the court system over the following months. Brenda initially tried to claim the money was for legitimate expenses and that the company name was just a tax strategy, but that fell apart quickly under scrutiny. Her lawyer eventually advised her to take a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to felony theft and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus interest and penalties. Her husband, who claimed he'd known nothing about it, put their house up for sale immediately. They were divorced within 6 months. The HOA elected a new board with Frank as president. One of the first things they did was review and revise all the bylaws, removing rules that contradicted city and state law. My grass height violation was officially expunged from the record, along with about 30 other ridiculous citations Brenda had issued over the years. But the story didn't quite end there. About 4 months after Brenda's arrest, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Mr. Zhu. This is Linda Wu from the HOA board." I'd almost forgotten about her. She'd resigned immediately after the meeting where everything blew up and had kept a very low profile since then. "Hi, Linda. What can I do for you?" I wanted to apologize and explain some things if you have a few minutes. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Denver the next day. Linda looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past few months. She ordered a latte and sat down across from me, her hands wrapped around the cup like she needed the warmth. "I knew something was wrong," she said without preamble. "Not at first, but probably for the last year or so." The numbers didn't quite add up, and Brenda was always really defensive when I asked questions. "Why didn't you say something?" she laughed bitterly. "Honestly, I was scared." Brenda had this way of making you feel like you were the problem, like you were stupid for not understanding how things worked. And she knew things about people, personal things. She knew I was going through a divorce and that I couldn't afford to move right now. She implied that if I made trouble, she'd make my life in the neighborhood unbearable. That's basically blackmail. Yeah, I realize that now. I should have gone to the police or at least to other homeowners, but I just wanted to keep my head down and get through it. She took a sip of her coffee. "I was the one who sent you the files." I sat back, surprised. "Why?" "Because you were the first person who stood up to her and didn't back down. When she got that ticket for calling the cops on you, I saw her actually face consequences for once. And then when you started asking about finances, I knew someone was finally going to do something. I couldn't be the public face of it, but I could help." "Thank you," I said. "Seriously. Without those files, it would have taken a lot longer to build a case. I should have done it sooner." All those people she harassed over the years, all the money she stole, I could have stopped it. She was good at manipulation and intimidation. "You're not the bad guy here, Linda." We talked for another hour. She told me about how Brenda had gradually consolidated power in the HOA, forcing out board members who asked too many questions and recruiting people who would just go along with whatever she said. Tom, the treasurer, had apparently been her friend from church and had trusted her completely, never bothering to verify any of the financial information she gave him. After Linda left, I sat in the coffee shop for a while, thinking about how easy it is for someone to abuse power when nobody's watching carefully. HOAs are supposed to be democratic organizations, but they rely on volunteer participation and oversight. When people are too busy or too intimidated to get involved, someone like Brenda can take over and run things like a personal fiefdom. The court date for Brenda's sentencing was in June, about 8 months after I'd first discovered the embezzlement. Patricia Morris, my lawyer, suggested I attend, both to see the conclusion of the case and to provide a victim impact statement on behalf of the HOA if I wanted to. I did want to. The courtroom was less dramatic than I expected. It was a regular weekday morning, and there were several cases being heard. Brenda's was scheduled for 10 a.m. She arrived with her lawyer, wearing a conservative gray suit and looking like she'd lost weight. Her hair, which had always been perfectly styled, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. The prosecutor laid out the case efficiently. The fake company, the forged invoices, the systematic theft over multiple years. The defense attorney tried to paint Brenda as someone who'd made mistakes, but wasn't a career criminal, emphasizing her previously clean record and her cooperation with authorities. When it came time for victim impact statements, Frank spoke on behalf of the current HOA board, explaining how the theft had depleted the community's reserve fund and forced them to raise dues to cover necessary expenses. Then I was called up. I kept it brief. Your Honor, what Miss Hutchinson did wasn't just steal money. She created an environment of fear and intimidation in our neighborhood. People were afraid to speak up because she'd retaliate with bogus violations and fines. She abused her position of trust and used it to silence anyone who might have discovered what she was doing. The financial damage is real, but the damage to our community's sense of security and trust might take even longer to repair. Brenda didn't look at me while I spoke. She stared straight ahead, her face blank. When the judge asked if she wanted to say anything before sentencing, she stood up. Her voice was quiet, very different from the shrill demands I was used to. I'm sorry, she said. I know that's not enough, but I am. I started taking the money because my husband lost his job and we were behind on bills. I told myself it was just a loan, that I'd pay it back. But then it got easier to take more, and I convinced myself I deserved it for all the work I did for the neighborhood. I know now that was wrong. I destroyed my marriage, my reputation, and my freedom because I was too proud to ask for help or admit I'd made a mistake. The judge listened, then delivered the sentence. 3 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 18 months. Full restitution of $63,842.16, plus $10,000 in penalties and fees. Permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Colorado. Brenda was taken into custody immediately. As the bailiff led her away, she glanced back at the courtroom. For just a second, her eyes met mine. I couldn't read her expression. Regret? Resentment? Maybe both. Life in Meadowbrook Hills slowly returned to normal over the next year, though it was a different kind of normal. The new HOA board under Frank's leadership was much more relaxed about enforcement. They focused on actual issues like maintaining common areas and ensuring the neighborhood pool and playground were kept in good condition. The ridiculous rules about grass height and chalk on driveways were formally abolished. New bylaws were written that emphasized community building over rule enforcement. We started having quarterly neighborhood barbecues, and Frank even organized a community garden in one of the common areas. My relationship with my neighbors improved dramatically. Margaret and her husband invited me to their annual holiday party. Frank and I started working on his motorcycle together on weekends. Even Tom, the former treasurer, apologized to me directly for not catching Brenda's fraud and thanked me for exposing it. The house next to mine sold about 10 months after Brenda's sentencing. A young couple with a toddler moved in, first-time home buyers who were excited about the neighborhood. I helped them move in on a Saturday, carrying boxes up their driveway. Is this a pretty quiet neighborhood? The husband asked me as we took a water break. I thought about how to answer that. "It is now," I said. "We had some drama with the HOA a while back, but it got resolved." "Oh, good. We were worried about getting into one of those nightmare HOA situations you hear about online." "Yeah, we had one of those. But the new board is great. Just don't shovel snow too early in the morning and you'll be fine." He laughed, thinking I was joking. The funny thing is, the whole situation had actually improved my life in unexpected ways. Before the snow shoveling incident, I'd been pretty isolated. I went to work, came home, and kept to myself. I'd moved to Denver from San Francisco for a job and didn't know many people outside of work. Fighting Brenda and investigating the fraud had forced me to connect with my neighbors. Those connections had turned into real friendships. Frank introduced me to his poker group. Margaret's kids started coming over to play with my dog, a rescue beagle I'd adopted a few months after all the court stuff ended. I actually felt like I was part of a community now, not just someone who lived in a house on a street. I even started dating someone I met at one of the neighborhood barbecues. Her name was Amy, and she lived on the other side of the development. She'd been one of the people at that chaotic HOA meeting where everything blew up. "I remember thinking you were either really brave or really crazy," she told me on our third date. "Standing up to Brenda like that." I'd gotten so many violation notices from her that I was just trying to be invisible. Little bit of both, probably, I admitted. I was just so annoyed about the snow shoveling thing. If she'd left me alone, I might never have looked into the finances. "Well, I'm glad you did. And I'm glad you shoveled your driveway that morning." We'd been dating for about 3 months when Brenda was released on parole. I got a heads up from Detective Kowalski, who'd stayed in touch over the months and had become something of a friend. "Just wanted you to know she's out," Kowalski said. "She served 18 months and the parole board approved her release. Conditions are pretty strict, though. She can't have any contact with anyone from Meadowbrook Hills, and she has to continue making restitution payments." "Do you know where she's living?" "Her sister's place in Aurora, last I heard. She's working as a receptionist somewhere, minimum wage job. Her ex-husband got the house in the divorce settlement and sold it. She basically lost everything." I felt a complicated mix of emotions about that. She'd stolen from all of us and had made people's lives miserable. She deserved consequences, but seeing someone lose absolutely everything was still sobering. "Thanks for letting me know," I said. "I don't think she'll try to contact anyone, but I'll keep an eye out." She didn't. As far as I knew, Brenda never came near our neighborhood again. Frank told me once that he'd seen her at a grocery store, and she'd turned and walked the other way as soon as she recognized him. Life continued. Amy and I got more serious. My dog became the neighborhood mascot, friendly with everyone. Work was going well, and I was up for a promotion. The neighborhood was thriving under the new HOA leadership, with actual community events and reasonable rules enforced with common sense rather than vindictiveness. One evening in late summer, almost 2 years after the snow shoveling incident that started everything, I was sitting on my front porch with Amy, watching the sunset. The neighborhood kids were riding bikes in the street, something Brenda would have had a fit about because of some rule she'd made up. But now, everyone just made sure to drive slowly and watch out for them. "You know what's weird?" Amy said, leaning against me. "I almost feel grateful for what happened with Brenda." "That's definitely weird," I said. "I mean, not grateful she stole from us or was horrible to everyone, but grateful that it forced us all to pay attention and get involved. Before that, nobody went to HOA meetings. Nobody knew their neighbors. Now look at us." She had a point. The neighborhood had become a real community, not just a collection of houses where people slept between work shifts. We looked out for each other. We helped each other. We actually knew each other's names and stories. Yeah, I said. I guess sometimes it takes a crisis to bring people together. And sometimes it just takes someone willing to shovel their driveway at 6:30 in the morning and not back down when a tyrant tells them to stop. I laughed. When you put it that way, it sounds almost noble. It was noble. In a weird, snow removal kind of way. We sat there as the sun finished setting, turning the sky pink and orange over the Rocky Mountains in the distance. Frank waved from his driveway where he was washing his car. Margaret's kids ran by, chasing a soccer ball. Someone a few houses down was grilling, and the smell of barbecue drifted through the evening air. It was just a normal evening in a normal suburban neighborhood in Denver, Colorado. And after everything that had happened, that normalcy felt hard-won and precious. The next morning, I was out front watering my lawn when a car pulled up. I didn't recognize it, but the woman who got out looked vaguely familiar. She was maybe in her 50s, with short gray hair and a nervous smile. "Peter Zoo?" she asked. "That's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Susan Richards. I live in the Parkside Meadows development about 3 miles from here." She held out her hand and I shook it, confused. "I heard about what happened with your HOA president, the embezzlement and everything." "Okay," I said slowly. "What about it? We're having similar problems in our HOA." "Not embezzlement as far as I know, but we have a board president who's acting like a dictator, fining people for ridiculous things, refusing to provide financial records, threatening anyone who questions her decisions." I had a sinking feeling I knew where this was going. "We're trying to organize the homeowners to push back, but nobody really knows how to start. I was hoping you might have some advice." I thought about saying no. I'd spent almost 2 years dealing with HOA drama, and I was enjoying the peace. But then I thought about how I'd felt when Brenda was making my life miserable, and how much better things were now that the neighborhood had taken back control. "Come inside," I said. "Let me make some coffee and I'll tell you what I learned." We spent 2 hours at my kitchen table. I walked Susan through the process of requesting financial records, explained the laws governing HOAs in Colorado, and gave her contact information for Patricia Morris and Detective Kowalski. I showed her how to organize homeowners and document violations of proper procedure. "The key thing is you can't do this alone," I told her. "You need other homeowners committed to the cause. If it's just you, the board can isolate and wear you down. But if you've got 10 or 15 people backing you up, they can't ignore it." "How did you get people on your side?" "Honestly, I got lucky. Brenda had pissed off so many people over the years that they were ready to revolt. They just needed someone to take the first step. Once I did that and showed people what was really going on, it snowballed." Susan took notes on her phone and asked smart questions. By the time she left, she seemed more confident and energized. "Thank you so much," she said at the door. "I know this was probably the last thing you wanted to deal with." "It's fine," I said, and surprisingly I meant it. These HOA boards only get away with this stuff because people don't push back. If I can help you avoid the same situation, that's worth a couple hours of my time. After she left, I told Amy about it. She gave me a look. "Are you becoming the neighborhood HOA problem solver now?" "God, I hope not," I said. "Once was enough." But over the next few months, 2 more people from other neighborhoods contacted me with HOA problems. Word had apparently spread through some online neighborhood forums about what had happened in Meadowbrook Hills. I gave them the same advice and resources I'd given Susan. In one case, the homeowners successfully recalled their board and installed new leadership. In another, they discovered their board president had been accepting kickbacks from contractors hired to do community maintenance, and he resigned before criminal charges could be filed. I didn't set out to become an HOA reform activist, but I guess that's what happened anyway. Patricia Morris joked that I should start a consulting business. I told her I had a perfectly good job already, thanks. On the 2-year anniversary of the snow shoveling incident, Frank threw a party. He called it the Shoveling Freedom Celebration and made everyone laugh by presenting me with a golden shovel trophy that he'd clearly made himself out of spray-painted plastic. To Peter, he said, raising his beer, who proved that sometimes the best way to deal with tyranny is just to keep shoveling. Everyone cheered. We ate burgers and drank beer and told stories about the Brenda era like it was ancient history, even though it had only been 2 years. Tom, the old treasurer, even showed up and made self-deprecating jokes about being the world's worst accountant. Later in the evening, after most people had gone home, I sat with Frank and a few others around his fire pit. You know what I learned from all this? Margaret said, poking the fire with a stick. HOAs aren't the problem. People not paying attention is the problem. If we'd all been watching, Brenda never could have done what she did. Eternal vigilance, Frank agreed. That's the price of keeping crazy HOA presidents from taking over. That and being willing to shovel snow at 6:30 in the morning despite threats from tyrants, I added. We all laughed, but there was truth to it. The neighborhood had learned its lesson. Board meetings now had regular attendance. Financial reports were reviewed carefully. People asked questions and expected real answers. And everyone shoveled their driveways whenever they wanted to, without fear of violation notices or angry neighbors calling the cops. As I walked home that night, Amy's hand in mine, I thought about how strange life is. 2 years ago, I'd been miserable, isolated, and under siege from a petty tyrant who thought she owned the neighborhood. All because I'd shoveled snow too early. Now I had friends, a girlfriend, a community I cared about, and apparently a reputation as someone who could take down corrupt HOA boards. None of that had been in my plans when I'd moved to Denver, but life rarely goes according to plan, and sometimes the unexpected detours lead somewhere better than where you were trying to go. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, my name is Jennifer. I live in the Riverside Commons development, and I heard you help some people with HOA problems. I was wondering if you might have some advice. I looked at the message, then at Amy. Another one, she smiled. You could just ignore it. I could, I agreed, but I knew I wouldn't. Because I remembered what it felt like to be bullied by someone abusing their authority, and to feel like there was nothing I could do about it. If I could help someone avoid that or escape it faster than I did, it was worth the time. I texted back, sure, give me a call tomorrow and we can talk. Amy shook her head, but she was still smiling. You're a good person, Peter Zoo, or a glutton for punishment. Those aren't mutually exclusive. We reached my house and I looked at it in the moonlight, just a regular suburban house in a regular neighborhood in Denver. Nothing special about it, really. But it was mine, and I'd fought for the right to live in it without harassment or fear. And somehow, that simple act of standing up for myself had rippled outward in ways I never could have predicted. All because I'd refused to stop shoveling snow when a woman named Brenda told me I had to wait another 30 minutes. Life is funny that way. The smallest acts of defiance can lead to the biggest changes. You just have to be willing to pick up the shovel and keep clearing your path, no matter who tells you to stop. I'd learned that lesson in the most absurd way possible, but I'd learned it well. And now I was passing it on to others, one frustrated homeowner at a time. The golden shovel trophy sat on my mantle, ridiculous and perfect. Every time I looked at it, I remembered that morning 2 winters ago, standing in my driveway at 6:30 a.m., scraping metal on concrete, completely unaware that I was about to uncover fraud and transform my neighborhood. All because a Karen named Brenda had made the mistake of calling the cops on the wrong person. And really, when you thought about it, that was the funniest part of the whole story. She'd started a chain of events that destroyed her life, all because she couldn't stand the sound of someone shoveling snow. Sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes with a shovel and a violation notice and a refusal to back down. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it comes with friendship, community, and a neighborhood that finally becomes what it was always meant to be. A place where people look out for each other instead of looking for reasons to tear each other down. I went inside, Amy following me, and closed the door on the cool Denver night. Tomorrow I'd call Jennifer and help her navigate whatever HOA nightmare she was dealing with. Tomorrow I'd go to work and walk my dog and live my normal life. But tonight, I was just grateful for snow, for shovels, for the sound of metal scraping concrete at 6:30 in the morning, and for every single thing that came after. Because sometimes the most annoying moment of your life turns out to be the beginning of something unexpectedly wonderful. And that's a lesson worth remembering, whether you're dealing with HOA tyrants or any other obstacle life throws your way. Keep shoveling, stand your ground, and never underestimate the power of refusing to be intimidated by someone who thinks they're in charge. That's how you win. That's how communities heal. And that's how one man with a shovel took down a corrupt HOA president and helped build something better in its place. The end. Not really. Just the end of this particular chapter, because the fight for reasonable HOAs and decent communities never really ends. It just changes form, finds new champions, and continues forward, one shoveled driveway at a time.